For 40 years, America tried negotiating with the Iranian regime. 40 years of talk, sanctions, broken promises, and growing threats. Now, President Donald Trump has taken military action against Iranian assets. So tonight, we ask the question Washington refuses to answer. At what point does diplomacy stop being strategy and start becoming surrender? This is a Hispanic Patriot Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Hispanic Patriot Podcast. My name is Nicholas Razzo. We are filming in an undisclosed location deep behind enemy lines, as always. And without further ado, we present to you all our fearless patron, Hugo Chavez Rey. Give it up for the Hispanic Patriots.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly edition of the Hispanic Patriot. We are going to be covering some news tonight. Of course, everybody's in tune with the Iran conflict, so that is going to be the topic of our show tonight. And we will begin by honoring the fallen so far. We have 6 fellow Americans who have given and paid the ultimate sacrifice. So let's take a moment to honor them now. Don't have any sound.
My deepest apologies. Captain Cody A. Quirk, 35, of Winter Haven, Florida. Sergeant First Class Noah L. Heitjens, 42, of Bellevue, Nebraska. Sergeant First Class Nicole M. Amor, 39, of White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Sergeant Declan J. Cody, 20, of West Des Moines, Iowa. And Major Jeffrey O'Brien, 45, of Mauki, Iowa. God rest them. Memory eternal.
Thank you to our heroes. All right. So tonight we've got, as I mentioned, information about this situation with Iran. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're talking about something that has been building for years, really decades, and that's the growing confrontation between the United States and the Iranian regime. Reports indicate that President Donald Trump has authorized military action, and as we know, that has taken place against Iranian military assets. It's important to note that it is against military assets. There are no civilian populations being targeted in this operation. Predictably, the political class and the foreign policy establishment are already reacting with outrage. They're saying this is reckless. They're saying this is escalatory. And of course, they're saying the same thing they always say. We should give diplomacy more time. But here's the question nobody in Washington seems willing to answer honestly. How much time is enough? Because the United States and the West have been negotiating with Iran for over 40 years. Negotiations didn't start last year. They didn't start with the nuclear deal. They didn't start with the Obama administration. We have been trying to negotiate with the Iranian regime since 1979. Exactly since the moment radical clerics seized power, took American hostages, and declared the United States the great Satan. For decades, the strategy has been the same: sanctions, talks, agreements, violations, more talks, more sanctions, and more violations. Round and round we go. And during all that time, what has Iran been doing? They've been expanding their influence across the Middle East, funding Hezbollah in Lebanon, arming militias in Iraq, funding Hamas in Gaza, backing the Assad regime in Syria when it was in operation, launching missiles at Israel, supporting the Houthis, targeting U.S. troops and allies through multiple proxy forces. And while all of that was happening, the Iranian regime was also advancing its nuclear capabilities. So when people say we need to give negotiations more time, the reality is we have, for going on 5 decades. Let that sink in for a moment. There comes a point in international relations when diplomacy stops being diplomacy and starts becoming delay. Delay that benefits the aggressor, in this case, Iran. And that's the strategic reality here. Every year that passes without consequences allows Iran to move closer to nuclear capability, to strengthen its proxy networks, and to expand its influence across the region. At some point, the window for preventing that outcome closes. That's why timing matters. Military action is always serious. It's never something that should be taken lightly. But sometimes decisive action prevents a much larger conflict later. And President Trump thought, correctly in our opinion, that decisive action was necessary now. History shows this over and over again. Weakness invites aggression. Deterrence prevents it. When regimes believe there will be no consequences for their actions, they push further. When they know there are real costs, they think twice. Think of it in terms of a bully. If a bully is allowed to continue bullying people and nobody pushes back or fights back, they are emboldened by their actions because there are no consequences. The goal of targeted military action is not endless war, as some would, and some are saying now. The goal is restoring deterrence. It's sending a clear message. Attacks on American interests, attacks on our allies, and the pursuit of nuclear weapons by a hostile regime will not be tolerated indefinitely. Critics say this risks escalation, but the uncomfortable truth is that inaction carries risk too. Allowing Iran down its current path without meaningful consequences also leads to escalation. It just happens slowly, quietly, and under the illusion that diplomacy is still working. So as the situation develops, Americans should remember something important. Peace is not preserved by pretending that threats don't exist. Peace is preserved when our enemies understand that the United States is serious about defending its interests and its allies. Sadly, with past administrations, we had none of that. For years, the Iranian regime has tested that resolve through proxy wars, attacks on our partners, and relentless pursuit of greater military power. Negotiations were tried, sanctions were tried, diplomatic agreements were tried, and yet the threat continued to grow. At some point, leadership requires acknowledging reality. A strategy that fails for decades is not a strategy, it's an illusion. Now, we will admit, and I think we can agree, no one wants war. America, least of all veterans like myself, veterans most of all don't want war. But Americans also understand the cost of conflict better than anyone. History also teaches us something equally important. The world becomes far more dangerous than aggressive regimes believe the United States lacks the will to act. Deterrence only works when it's credible, and credibility sometimes requires action. So as the headlines continue and the political debate intensifies, remember this. The goal is not endless conflict. The goal is to prevent a much larger one down the road. Because when hostile regimes believe America will never act, that's when the danger really begins. So,
Well, I couldn't have said that better myself, Hugo. No, it's absolutely true that, especially, young fighting age men like myself, and many of my friends and many of those who have served as well, they don't want war. They don't want to be sent to die for foreign powers. They don't want to be sent to die for moneyed interests. They don't want to be sent to die for anything else. American casualty tolerance is very low, and it should be. I mean, we were able to take out Maduro with no casualties, and that's how we would have preferred to have it in this operation against Iran. One quick point of clarification or addition, I should say, is that the sixth name that was released was Chief Warrant Officer 3, Robert M. Marzan, 54, of Sacramento, California. Memory laid to rest and memory eternal as well. And that's what we want to stress here, is that this is a developing story. We have so much more to cover. More happens in this operation every day. As we may know, the Kurds of Syria were recently driven out of their positions in Syria, and so many are looking for the Kurds in Iran as the sort of hope of this nationalist movement in the Middle East. So there is also recent knowledge of strikes from Iran on Azerbaijan, and there is a large Azerbaijani population in northwest Iran, which often speaks and acts of secessionary, aspirations. They want independence from Iran. So this is going to be an ongoing story for weeks, potentially, and Hispanic Patriot Podcast will be here to bring you all the updates, including a short summary of events so far. Check that out in the next coming days.
absolutely. So, what we're going to cover on this episode is number one, the history of U.S. Iran negotiations, why deterrence matters in international security, whether diplomacy had already run its course, and what this means for the Middle East and U.S. allies going forward. For those of you tuning in tonight, thank you for tuning in. We welcome you to the show. We invite you to join the conversation and share your thoughts with us in the chat. We will respond. We will, if you have questions, put them up there. If you have a comment, keep it clean, keep it topical, and we will definitely allow you to interact. If you're disrespectful, you will be booted. That's all there is to it.
Don't test Hugo. Just don't
yes.
test him. You want to respect the old man here because he will not hesitate.
I have my finger on the button here.
Whatever that button is, we don't know yet. But go find out. Why don't you? Go drop your comments. People really appreciate it.
So let's start with the history of U.S.-Iran negotiations. For those of you too young to remember, in 1979, when President Jimmy Carter was in office, the Iranian Shah, the Shah of Iran, was overthrown by a group of radical Muslim clerics that basically spawned a revolution. In that process, they attacked American interest in Iran, and they abducted, if you will, hostages and held them for 444 days. Okay. Now, a little history there. In that time frame, we were in the midst of a presidential campaign. Jimmy Carter was not running for reelection, but Ronald Reagan was running in the Republican Party. And all along the campaign trail, and I have inside knowledge because I was one of the first people who signed up to work on President Reagan's campaign in Texas in 1980. All it took was one speech, and of course the State of the Union, thanks to Jimmy Carter. And full disclosure, I was a Democrat up until that point. I voted Democrat. I readily admit that I voted for Jimmy Carter, coming out of the Watergate days and everything. It was a really dark time in politics at the time. Republicans had really messed up with Watergate, and the nation was ripe for a guy like Jimmy Carter to come in and just take the presidency. He fooled a lot of us with a lot of great feel-good ads, and he ended up being quite a joke as a president. Now, I say this with some respect because I never had anything personal against Jimmy Carter. I firmly believe that he was a good man, good Christian man, did a lot of good Christian work, but he was just a horrible president. He was not a good president. And that's why the Iranians were emboldened to take those hostages, because they knew that Jimmy Carter wasn't going to do anything. Now, fast forward to the 1980 campaign, when President Reagan was doing his speeches, stump speeches, and getting the nomination. One of his messages that he kept resonating to the Iranians was, in no uncertain terms, that they will release those American hostages or else. I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly how he said it, but that's basically what he told them.
Honestly, might as well have been.
Yes. And as the campaign rolled on and towards the election, of course, the Iranians were hoping that the Democrat would win the election and that they would have no consequences. As it turned out, election day came along. Ronald Reagan won in a massive landslide. I believe he won 49 states. It was just ridiculous. Immediately, the tone of the Iranian radicals changed. They began sending messages to the president-elect, and the president-elect kept responding to them. If those hostages are not freed by Inauguration Day, there will be consequences. And they took it to heart, and Ronald Reagan meant it. Lo and behold, on the day of inauguration, or I think it was the day after, all the hostages were released by the Iranians. It was a miracle. But that goes to show you what a strong president can do versus a weak one. And thank God that we had the wherewithal to elect Ronald Reagan, because that was the beginning of a great decade, in my opinion. He had a lot of work to do. He had to rebuild the military, rebuild the economy, etc. But with the Iranian situation, they freed the hostages, but they still had control of the country, and that began their radical regime. And that's where they started becoming the world's primary sponsor of terrorism around the world.
That's
and
absolutely true.
That was the instability of the Middle East. So,
isn't that interesting?
Let's
Hugo,
talk.
Please go ahead. No, it's interesting that.
No, I want you to. I was going to say, you go ahead and let's talk a little bit about those the history of U.S.-Iran negotiations.
Well, basically, I think that up to the point where Hugo covered, we enter in the darker period of U.S.-Iranian relations, because after the series of hostage-taking really didn't pan out across the Middle East, there were similar incidents in many other places. It's very common for that part of the world, but they realized that that wasn't working, especially against the overwhelming force of the United States as a geopolitical power. So, unfortunately, about a year and a half or so later, after these hostages were released, we had the Beirut bombing at the main international multinational force in Lebanon's it was a very large barracks, you see, and 307 people died, including 241 U.S. military personnel. There were also French personnel there as well. But this is basically the opening shot in the terroristic campaign that we have been on the receiving end of from Iran for literal decades after this. This was now their primary weapon, was bombings, was terrorism. And if you look at Iran's sort of tentacles and so many things, you really have to blame them for almost every major act of terrorism um, against the United States. Maybe, of course, with 9/11 being excluded from that. These Shia Muslims are not really like a lot of the other Muslims we're finding, and we have found, and that's actually saying something. These people are very mystical in their beliefs. They believe that they actively influence world events in mystical ways, not just material ones. And in fact, there has been a lot of speculation. And Hugo, I would love to know your opinion on this. That the Ayatollah, who maybe we're going to jump to the present at the present moment, when the Ayatollah was killed, there were many people in Iran and elsewhere who said that he had openly exposed himself so that he could be martyred, so that Iran would band together, be against Israel and all these, and also bring the world closer to world war, where these people believe that their Superman hero, you could think of him, the Mahdi, will arise and do something beyond that, whatever they think it is. What do you think about that idea that Iranian mystic people and all these religious zealots in Iran believe that all of this is part of a plan to bring about a world war?
Yeah, I don't buy that narrative, and for one
Sounds
reason,
coping a little bit.
it's been shown that he was hiding in a super fortified underground bunker, and he thought that they couldn't reach him, but he underestimated the power of our bunker busting missiles that go through multiple layers of concrete before they detonate.
Yeah,
And
usually if you want to be martyred, you're not going to be hiding in a concrete bunker.
yeah, he was. And one guy joked, I saw a diagram where they showed where he was likely standing, and they said if he had gone one level lower, he might have had a chance to survive.
That's like the Titanic. If it just had an extra hull, it would have been fine, kind of logic.
Yeah. No, I don't buy that. That's just propaganda that they're putting out to appease their radical people, the people who supported this murderous regime. And of course, with those people, everything is about Allah and the 72 virgins that they're going to get when they
Well, to
go.
give some credence, because we do want to respect the Iranians who are fighting against the regime. I actually was able to meet several of them at the state capitol on the weekend of February 22nd, where there was a rally in front of the state capitol, partially in support. In fact, a large impetus for it was support for the regime's actions. So I think that's something to always look at: is what.
They were supporting the regime.
No, I should say, that would be a little bit of a joke for any leftists who are watching. No, the Trump administration, that they would recall the regime, the evil Trump regime. That is who these people from the Middle East were supporting, and I think a lot of left-wing people would be surprised of that. So I definitely want to be a little cheeky there, but no. To all jokes aside, these Iranians were, and you see this all over the world actually in the Iranian diaspora. These people are not in Iran for a very good reason. Many of them could be and would be killed if they returned back to their homes, which is terrible. We want to see a free Iran, not because we want to go up and be the world's police man and bomb everything. It's because we have a legitimate empathy for these people, who I'm sure, Hugo, as you know, they're very close to us, Persians. They're not Arabs. Islam did not come to them naturally. They were conquered by the Arabs and forced to be Muslim. In fact, some of the even the Iranian clerics have family members who were Zoroastrian as late as a couple of hundred years ago. So this is not a native culture to
A lot
Persians.
of the Persians are actually Christians.
Yeah, there's an
And
amazing Christian uh, revival, I want to say, but it was a beautiful missionary thing going on in Iran right now.
I want to acknowledge a couple of comments. I got somebody that is congratulating you on your campaign. So thank you for that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And, and one of our viewers is saying that in addition to the martyr narrative, that he also doesn't buy, he said that you would not attack these other nations and not expect severe consequences.
Exactly. If this was about an Islamic jihad, maybe Iran wouldn't be bombing several Muslim nations, including fellow Shia nations. It's really amazing to see this level of geopolitical aggression, especially when it doesn't
Absolutely.
have much benefit to them, to be honest.
Yep. And so this is fast forward through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the early 2000s. Iran has been, and anybody that denies that Iran is the foremost state sponsor of terrorism in the world doesn't know what they're talking about.
You just don't know the history. And if I might bring a small crumb of context, the whole Sunni Wahhabi terrorism that was happening with Osama bin Laden, we should remember something, that Osama bin Laden, as well as the terrorists who ended up fighting in Iraq, were inspired to compete with Iran. They had been defeated in the Iran-Iraq war, and they saw that their branch of Islam had no jihad, had no attention, because it was all about the Iranians back between the 70s, 80s, and Saddam Hussein stealing the thunder in the 90s. But Saddam Hussein was not an Islamist. He was a Arab socialist. A lot of people forget that he was a Cold War vestige, basically. So basically a commie. So either way. But the Sunni Wahhabis, they saw Iran as their primary competitor. They wanted to be like Iran. They wanted to be better than Iran. That's why you saw so many countries around there banding together who were Sunni. But now with different leadership in Saudi Arabia, that's been different, and Iran is the last Islamist standing.
And that's important to understand is the different factions of the Islamic groups. You have the Shias, you have the Sunnis, you have the Kurds, and they all have different philosophies about not only their religion, but how they want to interact with the world. And if you look at the history of the Iraq-Iran war, they were at odds with what they wanted to do. So Saddam Hussein was not at that time one of the ones that was driving the terrorism faction. So that was a kind of the only reason that we went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan is because we were looking for bin Laden. And he was in Iraq for a time, then he was in Afghanistan. Saudi Arabia had already expelled him because he was a Saudi. Bin Laden was a Saudi. And, you get people that don't understand that part. He came from a very wealthy family, and that's
he was a rich boy. Funny how that always works. That the ideologue with the money is always the most dangerous one.
And that's what. And he was the one. He funded his own movement, so to speak. So that's a history that people should explore. But the way that the region has evolved, let's say, you've got Syria. They booted Assad. Egypt came around, the nations around Israel. Saudi Arabia doesn't want conflict. They don't want.
Jordan's been a stable monarchy for a very long time, and they have, it's been a good country there too.
So you have to look at who it is that is trying to foment, the discord and cause chaos in the region, and it comes from the radical Islamic Muslims. And there is a difference. I don't paint all Muslims with the same brush, but at the same time, I do believe that there could be more opposition from good, let's just say good Muslims who want peace and to live in peace. Um, they don't speak up, a lot of it because they're afraid. Uh, they don't want to be targeted. They know that these radicals are just like, look, let's call them what they are. They're animals. They just don't,
Well, they'll kill your whole family.
they
Like,
have no regard for human life. And that's proven in their, strategies of suicide bombings and other things. So it's a major difference that we have to understand. I'm going to recommend to the audience out there that you look up a guy named Robert Spencer. He is one of the world's most educated jihadist experts. He's written multiple books. I have about three or four of his books here, and he dives into the detail of how all of this evolved, dating back to the 1920s, and how the Muslim Brotherhood was formed and came up through the ranks. So when you look at what's going on in the U.S. today, the Muslim Brotherhood is what's driving all of the Muslim movements around the country, in particular Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, now Minnesota with the Somalis, and there's different populations, and you have the organization called CAIR, it's CAIR, that is the Coalition of American Islamists, something or other. I can't remember but look that group up. These groups, the Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR, are the two that are driving these Muslims to become citizens and run for office. And I saw a post the other day that said that we should pass a law that says that if you're not an American born uh, citizen, that you shouldn't be serving in Congress. And the other thing is, these people who are serving in Congress, if they violate their oath, like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and some of these radicals that are in Congress, AOC, if these people violate their oath, they should be expelled. I don't understand why Ilhan Omar is still in Congress.
well, you know why?
Okay.
Because the Democrats have that seat, and it's a safe seat, and they'll never lose it now because they've imported a population and made them legal who will justify that seat.
But there should be enough outrage among regular Americans who have been elected to Congress to expel such a person who is anti Constitution, anti American, and consistently violates her oath. And she said it in her own words. She said, my allegiance is not to the United States, my allegiance is to Somalia. Now, how much more plain can you get?
I mean, that's almost a statement of direct sedition right there. In
It
fact,
is.
but there's multiple instances of this. There are people who say I would fight for Mexico if Mexico invaded, even though I'm an American. There are people, and as a Mexican American, I denounce that point of view. If you've chosen to be a U.S. citizen, you fight for the United States. And if you really care that much, try your best to make sure everything is peaceful between families and borders. There's
Yes,
things
there
you could do
are
before war
there
happens.
are Mexicans of that ilk, but
But we want to stay on this
they're
because
not in
we really
Congress. Yes,
they're typically not in Congress. No,
let's
thank
go
God.
to the next issue, and that would be why deterrence matters in international security.
Very good segue.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that we really can see this from two examples where deterrence was used and where deterrence was not used. And the thing that we can remember from the Vietnam War, we're going to take the Vietnam War. We had a strong president, JFK. We had a strong series of presidents. Now, I don't agree with everything from Lyndon B. Johnson. In fact, I disagree with most things from Lyndon B. Johnson. But he was strong on Vietnam, perhaps too strong to the American people in a way where it completely deteriorated their efforts. They completely deteriorated their war exhaustion and really misused the military in a lot of ways. But when we had decisive, overwhelming force, especially under Nixon, bombing the Vietnamese allies, we were able to make strides in that war. We only lost because we refused to go the whole way. and many, many Vietnamese died as a result. So we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to follow the examples of weak leaders in a war or strong leaders in a war? And that's why I see the Iran and Vietnam conflicts very similarly in this way, because I think this conflict has gone on for so many presidents. I mean, in my lifetime, Iran has always been a threat, and I've seen different presidents deal with it different ways. George W. Bush was very containing, very isolating when it came to the regime, but didn't do anything decisive against it, mostly because he had other problems at the time. Joe Biden was completely weak. Obama was completely weak, basically gave them everything they wanted in the hope that they would appreciate us, that they would return the favor, when their religious and philosophical views would never allow that. Now we see Trump, and Hugo, you remember in Trump's first term, the Iranians were scared completely of Trump. There was nothing that they wanted to do. What has changed? We have to ask, what has changed is that the Iranians now know that Trump has their number, wants them out of power, needs Iran to be a stable ally against Russia and China especially, and to deter India. And so he realizes something. Either now or never, the Iranian regime needs to make a decision now, or it will never be able to make that decision, or another
Well,
president won't allow it.
to begin with, I have my own narratives about Obama and what his motives were. And you remember when he said, we are days away from the fundamental transformation of America.
That included in foreign policy.
And people didn't pay a lot of attention to that, but I sure as hell did. And that's because I was at that time reading books by Robert Spencer. And he knew what Obama's background was. His father was a Marxist, and he was brought up in the Marxist ideology. So he wanted to transform America, literally, and not in the good way. So they became appeasers. They basically wanted to do whatever they could to move the Muslim Brotherhood agenda forward. And that's what Obama did with his 2 terms. And Biden, learned from Obama. Now, I'm also of the belief that Biden's administration was basically a shadow government and a 3rd term for Obama. I believe Obama was pulling all the strings behind the scenes, and he was just the puppet there. But we won't dive into that segue. But I say that to say this. What's the difference? Well, when President Trump's first term came along, he admitted that he made a lot of mistakes. He trusted the wrong people. He made some bad choices. But he learned from all of that. Trump 1 and Trump 2 are completely different leaders. In the second term, number 1, he knows that this is his final term. So he's going to try to do as much as he can to lay the groundwork for a revitalized America. And if we're lucky enough, and if Americans appreciate what Donald Trump is doing, we will elect another Republican behind him. And that could be either J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, either
Or
one
maybe
of which.
both. Who knows?
Maybe both as a ticket, but I would be happy with either one. And then 8 years of that, followed by possibly another 4 to 8 years of the successor, and you could be looking at Republican control for anywhere from 12 to 24 years.
Isn't that amazing, Hugo, actually? It's funny. During a time in Mexico, there was one guy who was running everything. There was sort of one ideology that was running everything, and it was called the Maximato. So I guess this would be the Magamato.
Absolutely. So that's what happens with Obama, and when he sent them billions in cash. And what did they do with
cash? Actually, was the tagline at the time.
Yeah, he sent pallets of cash, literally. And
yeah, go look that up. That is a literal point. We won't dive too into it because we'll be here all night. But go look that up. It's really funny.
So,
well, it's tragic, but
the bottom line is during Obama's term, and the interim Biden term, there was no deterrence for Iran. Biden proceeded to do what? He opened the borders so that we would be flooded with despots from all over the world. And in that group, let's say, I'm sure there are a number of terrorist cells that have spawned here in the US thanks to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So no thanks to them. But
No, absolutely.
the Iranians were emboldened then. They would do whatever they could. They were promoting Hamas. They were promoting Hezbollah, the Houthis. They just kept on, fomenting their terror around the world. And they knew that we had a weak president. Now,
It's true.
why do you think the Iranians have very likely been involved in the potential assassination of Donald Trump?
Well,
because they knew that he was going to bring the hammer. And once he got elected, they went, oops. And that's why it's important to understand the geopolitical history of what's going on. In America, unfortunately, we have a lot of Neville Chamberlains. Okay?
We do, unfortunately. Republican and Democrat, it should be said.
Yes, absolutely, both. And if you don't know the reference, look him up. Neville Chamberlain. He was
definitely a historical figure you all need to know. But Hugo, I want to mention one point that I think. So it reminds me. This whole thing reminds me of something. As you guys know, I do general contracting work, and one of the things we do is we fell trees. So it's interesting when you're pulling down a tree. The most important moment is at the very, very, very end when that tree starts coming down. Because as soon as people, often untrained people, see that tree coming down, their first instinct is to run away. And that's the least safe thing you could do, because now you're no longer in control of this tree that you're felling, and you really need to make sure it's done right. And the man in front is meant to fall back on the other man if that tree is going down in the wrong way, because he is meant to protect that next man. And so I think that something similar is happening with Iran here. We need to be able to not run away at the last sight of that felled tree. And I fear that both under Obama in 2009, when a tweet from Obama could have done something to help set off the Iranian people, give them support during their protests, during Joe Biden's time, again, we have politicians that don't know how not to run when the tree starts falling. And I think this is exactly where Donald Trump's mind is. He understands that the Iranian regime's tree is falling, and he's going to be there until the end, until it's knocked down. And I think now's the time for it, because, Hugo, of course, Iran supplies two major things to its two major allies: oil to China and missiles to Russia.
And I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's a key point that a lot of people are missing. We went into Venezuela, who was supplying oil to China. Now we've gone into Iran, who also supplies oil to China. So in the process, as I always say, President Trump is always playing chess while others are playing checkers. He knows exactly what he's doing. And anybody that calls him a dummy is a dummy themselves, because there is no way this man doesn't know exactly what he's doing, and every move is calculated to end up in a certain result. Now, this move is what was needed, and it's a twofold move. Number one, the Iranian people have been crying out for someone to help them regain their freedom
for decades.
And now President Trump just the other day told them, we have done what you asked. Now it's up to you to take your country back. We will assist you in ways that we can, but I firmly believe that the president has no intention of putting boots on the ground. So that's a narrative from the left that keeps coming out and say, well, there's no way they can avoid that. There's no way. Baloney. There is a way. It's called President Trump. He will not put boots on the ground in Iran. And if I have to eat those words, I am going to be a very dissatisfied MAGA guy because.
Well, I don't think you will be eating those words, Hugo, because I think what people have to understand is in fifth generation warfare, in the era of warfare we live at, the whole I'm gonna send 200,000 men to take ground from the sea to Esfahan. Like that's just not how warfare is done now. There's a lot of what's called infiltration and interdiction. There is a lot of airborne operation. We basically do everything from the air. I mean, ask Hugo. He was in the Air Force. That he would probably say we do everything. Um, Although an army man would probably point out that the army has the largest amounts of air assets rather than the Air Force. But we love all of our branches of services here. You're
Yes.
all kicking butt. There you go. See, Hugo is an honest man. But we're kicking butt. All of the branches are kicking butt, especially in the Space Force. We can see everything that Iran has, and the Space Force is a huge part of that. So shout out to you guys in the Space Force. So beyond that, though, Hugo, I wanted to ask you a quick question with your with your age and experience and wisdom. Um, what do you think happens in Iran when the United States is bombing, when the regime has the ability to propagandize, they're trying to tear us apart. They're trying to, make it like Syria, tear it apart in different places. What do you think we as Americans can do to reassure our Iranian friends that are fighting for freedom that America does not want to hurt their culture, does not want to hurt them, and that they just want to see them free? Because that propaganda aspect is huge. It was totally a failure in Afghanistan. It was more successful in Iraq. But how do you think we do damage to the right places and heal the damage that needs to be done with the Iranian people?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, we have to recognize that all the targets that we've been bombing are military assets, military and infrastructure that had the ability to help the whatever's left of the regime to fight. Number one, fight back. Number two, take action against even their own people, because there are reports coming out. And let's take one step back. Okay, we were able to do what we were able to do because of two organizations, the CIA and the Mossad. Okay, they have been planning this for a long time. This didn't happen overnight. They had spotters watching the leadership, the despots, the ayatollahs, all the commanders and everything. They knew exactly where these people were. And when they got the signal, they lit up that building, and that's how we knew where to strike. Okay. So there is no hiding. The rats can try to hide, but we're going to find them because we have the best technology, we have the best intelligence. Now, second thing, this was all along a true two-pronged objective. It was to get rid of the world's number one state sponsor of terror, eliminate the threat of nuclear facilities in that country, and then to open the country back up so that the people could live free again and elect their own government, their own, economy, build back their own economy. We as Americans, I think, are ready to help them in any way we can, with the exception of putting those boots on the ground. And I don't think that'll be necessary, because now I'm hearing reports that some of the military and the police are now turning against the regime.
This is actually how we saw the beginning of the end of the Syrian regime as well.
Yep, exactly. And the smart ones are going to want to do. You got to remember that there's probably, I don't know what percentage, I'm not going to throw out a number, but there has to be a certain number of people who were serving in the military and police forces, secret police forces, that really weren't doing it voluntarily. So now that the despots are gone, they have the ability to say, okay, we're free to, we're going with our people now, and we're going to fight back against what's left of the regime. And let's clean it up, finish the job, and then move towards a more normalized country, economy, and elections. So that's kind of the scenario that I see, and this is what bothers me about all these reports from the left and the liberals. And you know, I saw somebody posted online and says, "Funny thing happened on the way to Iran. Iranians are now more pro-Americans than some Democrats in this country." Isn't that amazing to even say that? I mean,
No, it's really true. No, because you know what it is that the people who are drawn to America from other countries, who really feel the patriotic spirit of the republic, they don't have entitlement to it. There's a lot of Americans who feel entitled to the legacy of their forefathers, whether they respect their forefathers or not. But traditions are important. Your legacy and history is important to respect. And if you don't do that, it's very hard to keep the continuity of your country. You're not going to
exactly.
keep the culture of something you don't respect. And that's why I think, we have to go back, and I think we have to respect the memory of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think all of us have opinions about it one way or another, and we should have those opinions because many of them are true. But something that war did, that we should forever honor the soldiers who fought in that war. We need to forever honor them, because the tens of thousands of terrorist fighters that came from all over the world, all over the Muslim world, to fight Americans, they fought that fight in Afghanistan and Iraq,
Hmm.
not Disneyland, not
Yep.
the Vatican, not London. Well, unfortunately, we can't say London anymore, but shout out to our friends in Londonistan. Um, but quite literally, we have been trying to put this genie back in the bottle, no cultural pun intended, for many years now. And honestly, as an American who honors those soldiers who fought that war and who are often disparaged as, fighting for foreign powers, all these sorts of things, I really do believe that they fought for America,
Yep.
no matter what the intentions of their leaders were. They fought for America so Americans wouldn't have to face that horrible terrorism. And now that's what's happening again, but under a president who has fought globalist powers, who has been directly against the new world order and all of those elements. He's been against those things. So when he acts in this way, we have to support him in a way that aligns with our values. So again, we in Hispanic Patriot Podcast say no to war, no to boots on the ground, no to a full ground scale invasion, a full scale and ground invasion. That would be beyond the pale. And I don't think we need it. I don't think that's how we win
Yeah.
wars in the 21st century now.
And I'm going to, I'm going to make this statement. This is my statement, and I firmly believe it. I'm not going to call this thing a war, because it's not a war. It's an operation. It's a campaign
The other
to
side isn't fighting back like it's a war.
exactly. And the other thing is that we need to get away and expose strongly the anti-Semites and the anti-Zionists in this country. People don't understand the difference between those two, and I think it's important that people learn what it means when they're talking. Because when I make a comment online, and I'll say that I'm against anti-Semites, someone responded, "Well, there's a difference between Zionists and anti-Semites." And my response to that was, it's a very thin line between a Zionist and an anti-Semite.
It's
And
very true. As
and
personally, I think that the more Jews in Israel, the better, to be honest. But we have so many people who love this country who are Christians as well. But I wanted to ask you, Hugo, then, what do you think of a phrase that comes very much from many of my fellow young compatriots in the right wing movement, where they say, "Well, you just want Americans to die for Israel." What do you think about that phrase? Die for Israel.
I think that's the dumbest statement coming out from certain people. I mean, when I asked, somebody said that to me the other day, and I said, "Explain that to me. Why? Why do
I
you
think
why do you say that?" Number
I,
one,
I think the
because
implicit assumption is that the Israelis are driving this military action
yeah,
solely, and that there can be no benefit to the United States whatsoever in any of this
and that's
somehow.
the other dumb narrative. People saying that Netanyahu or that Trump is somehow Netanyahu's puppet. Now, anybody who thinks that Donald Trump is a puppet to anybody is just plain ignorant.
Did you see the way that Trump was handling Netanyahu's wife? I don't think he's the puppet. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think the King of New York does probably have the King of New York and Emperor of the United States probably has a little bit more power than the colonial satellite state in this very crazy rendition of things. The idea that the United States could be a puppet of another country, I think, is silly on its face value. But I understand the argument. There's a lot of influence between the U.S. and Israeli government. We have a lot of money from AIPAC going to candidates. We have influence in our government. There's no doubt about that. But I think the idea that it's entirely at the driving seat of American foreign policy and that American military, generals and brass don't also conduct these operations in a way that benefits the United States, I think that's just militarily impossible and very philosophically unlikely, to say the least.
Well, I have a biblical answer for that one. And it says, I'm paraphrasing it, God will honor nations that honor Israel. And if we as a nation ever turn our back on Israel, we are going to be paying a heavy price because God will not be mocked. Okay. Now that's my biblical comment for the night. And those who are non-believers out there are probably turning over right now and yelling and screaming at their screens.
Personally, yeah. I've actually renamed my car. I've actually renamed my dog, and I've renamed my horse Israel, and I've also renamed our pack Israel. So if anyone wants to bless us, I've also renamed the Hispanic Patriot Podcast Israel. So if anyone wants to bless Israel here, please give us a like and a subscribe. Please donate to us if you wish. And jokes aside, I definitely not sure if for me the state of Israel is what the Bible is talking about in that passage, but it definitely does have an influence in the United States, this understanding that Israel is key to the progression of history. That's what most religious Jews would also say, is that the restoration of Israel is key to the progression of history. I think Iran and Iranians, even in the regime, would agree that the foundation of Israel was key to their worldview. So yeah. I think that people have to remember something from the famous psychologist Carl Jung. Behind all opposition is love. So whether you vehemently hate the Iranian regime because you're an Israeli supporter, or whether you vehemently hate Israel because you believe they control our government or something, there's a certain amount of, especially if you're a Christian, there's a certain amount of love behind both of those, because what they're saying is, I want my country to be independent. I don't want Israel to be hurt for the problems that America has. I don't want Iranians to be unjustly hurt by Israel or the United States. There's actually a lot of Christian love being had here between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And I'm not saying that in an ecumenist kind of way. I completely understand what is at stake here. But I do believe that in tragic circumstances, we need to try our best to find the poetic and beautiful in whatever we do, because that might be how we close the book on this story, is something.
And that topic is a discussion for another show. I think we can spend a whole hour talking about the details of that relationship, about revelations, about what's coming. And
just remember that in the last chapter, we win and Christ wins.
Absolutely.
But no matter how this war ends, folks, no matter how this conflict, comes to a close, just remember the old Irish saying, it'll be all right in the end. And if it's
I'm going to dock your pay for every time you say war.
Okay. I knew that was coming too. But folks, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. And with me, with a depreciated, non-existent paycheck, we definitely wish for all of you safety and love in this time.
Okay, future paychecks.
Hey, everybody, I appreciate that. And if you give us a like right now, Hugo might give me a bonus. So please.
Yes, before we go off the air here, please, if you enjoyed the show, hit the like button, subscribe, and if you're so moved, please give us a little love through the donation button. And everything goes to furthering our message and helping getting the message out to everyone.
Absolutely.
Before we close out, real quick, there are assemblies coming up here in Colorado. If you've been to your caucus, you should go to your county and then state assembly. And a lot of candidates. Next week we have a U.S. Senate candidate, Mr. Janak Joshi, who will be joining us for an interview. So tune in next week for a good interview.
And if you were elected a delegate for Senate District 11, please consider voting.
Keep looking up Nick. We need him in the Senate.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you very much.
Good night, folks. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless our troops.
God bless our troops.